Hi everyone, welcome back. We hope you enjoyed the WIDS Worldwide content and had a nice break. It was incredible hearing about the other Women in Data Science events and watching the speaker lineup, highlighting women from diverse backgrounds and experiences all across the globe. Our next talk will be a panel focused on the challenges of data. I know that I have many challenges with my data, so maybe they'll help me solve some of them. In this panel, we'll hear from 3 ladies on their experiences in this space. Logan Wilt is a data scientist in DXC's Applied AI Center of Excellence and an AI Garage leader. Dr. Jane Greenberg is the director of the Metadata Research Center at the College of Computing and Informatics and a professor at Drexel University. Joanna Levy is currently director of strategy and analytics for the Comcast Spectacor, the parent company of the Philadelphia Flyers and the Wells Fargo Center. The last few minutes of this panel will open up for questions. Please post all of your questions in the chat as you have them, and we'll get them to the speakers. We're looking forward to learning more about the challenges of data. Quick reminder to please mute your microphone and turn off your video and post your questions in the chat. Welcome, ladies.
Great. Thanks, Carly. Thanks, Michelle. I'm really excited to dive into this. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. So my name is Joanna, and I'll be moderating this panel, and I'm really excited to talk about some of the challenges of data. So let's dive right in. So one of the questions I wanted to start with, in most situations, we kind of have more data than we can use. And one of the challenges is just how do we make sense of it all? How do we figure out what's important and not get overwhelmed? So kind of on the most basic level, is more, or is more always better? How do we make sense of having too much data in some situations? So I'll let you two take it away.
Yeah, for us in the things that we work on within the COE, so we're often coming into projects where we are not the experts in the domain, so generally speaking, our first request is to try and get a target problem to solve. Absent that, it's like what you say, it's too much data, you're just mining, you're kind of flailing about. There are certain domains where you can go after, low-hanging fruit, but those usually don't provide a lot of information. We've been doing some, work like market basket analysis and such on, like, say, consumer and retail. Those are basic things that you can do and be interesting to people. But the vast majority of teams have already done something to that matter. So for us, it's to start with a problem, and then we start just looking. We actually look at the field names, the feature names, and just kind of start highlighting them off, thinking maybe this is interesting, maybe this means something. We'll either go back to the subject matter experts with that, or we'll start running some very light level preliminary analysis on it to let them react and say, this is meaningful to me, or no, that's a junk field and we actually never use it for anything. It's a more artistic start than scientific start to the process for us.
Jane, you're on mute.
Great. I'll jump in. I agree. I call it sometimes like a dance. So you said artistic, but it's not really the data. It's to figure out the question. So you're saying the problem. I think it's the problem and then the question you want to ask by looking at the data. And it's a little bit of a dance because some people have a question and then they go find the data. Other times you're presented with all this data and there's a little dance back and forth. Explore the data that you have, and by exploring it, you figure out what questions you want to ask. I would also say we don't always have the data that we need, right? We have tons of big data, but I heard Eric Horvitz actually talk at Microsoft Research, and he used this term data deserts. So, for instance, we might have data on illnesses in, some kind of area where we know there's high pollutants, but we don't have all the data over the years about pollutants in water or pollutants in air. So you might have tons of this health data, but not the other data to make, the analysis or to perform the analytics you want. So just sort of back to good questions, guide good research, and it takes time. So, yeah.
That's great. I love hearing about art and dancing
and
station and data. So kind of building on that a little bit, thinking about the context of data. So a lot of data gets disconnected from its context on its way from a data lake to the data scientists. How do you think about that in your research?
You want me to take this one first?
Sure.
All right, we'll go back and forth. So I'll jump in, but I'm biased. Oh,
Sorry.
It's not my dog, but it could be. Also, I just want to say thanks so much for organizing this. I'm so excited to be here. But in my area of research, which is metadata, there's a lot of related research that we do, but other people also in the area of data provenance and data lifecycle management. And there are increasingly standards that people put out. And I would say tracking the life cycle of the data is integral to doing your data science. The open data movement, or even in closed and sensitive data, there's the reason we're excited about this data is we want to reuse it and repurpose it. But you want to know if that data has been modified, who used it, how they used it, how was the data generated. And so providing that context in what my field calls life cycle management or provenance tracking is really important. And so there are increasingly standards, and adopting them, developing them, and evaluating their effectiveness is really, really important. So that's it. Turn it over.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. For us working like within the enterprise, one of the things that I like to use is to kind of try and get away from the phrase of, say, a data lake and move towards more the concept of a data watershed, that the origin systems are just as important, and watching that flow as if it's going through streams into rivers and then ultimately pouring into, say, a lake or an ocean. That looking at as a data ecosystem is really, really important. And like you said, that provenance of knowing where it originally came from. And then once it got to the data lake, what have you done with it since? One of the things that I institute with the developers on our teams is what we call data stages. So like you said, we take the raw data and we put it into our lakes, and that stays untouched. It's exactly as we've received it. We don't do anything with it. And all modifications go from then onward and will be stored in, say, a data stage 1 or 2 or 3, depending on what cycle it's gone through. But that way we can always go back to our source, what is sourced to us, and recreate our experiments.
That's really interesting. Jane, you mentioned that you work with metadata. And so I kind of wanted to jump ahead in one of my questions since you brought it up.
No.
Well,
yes.
Let's start with an easy one, hopefully easy. For people in the audience who don't know much about metadata, and I'll count myself as one of them, can you kind of talk a little bit more about what it is and how you use it, and then we can get into more of the science around metadata?
Sure. Sorry I used the term, but no, I'm really passionate about it. I like to say in my center and people I work with, we geek out about meta stuff. So you've probably heard the word metadata. If you haven't, you will now. So it's data about data, or information about information. But really that's not that useful. Think of it as descriptive information about your data. So for instance, a variable name, the who, what, where, when, how, and why of your data. What is it about? Who collected it? When was it collected? It's this meta level of data. I always say, like, thank you to Snowden, although, maybe we shouldn't get too deep. But he really, put the word metadata on the map with the whole national security fiasco, basically, with phone records and data about who was calling, when they were calling. But metadata itself basically supports functions. It supports discovery. It supports lifecycle management. It supports preservation. It supports authenticity tracking. It can record an event, when an event took place, who did it, and so forth. So I like to say your data is only good as your metadata. I can get philosophical, but I think that's probably a good place to leave it. I guess just one more thing, when you look at your food content and you're like, how much sugar, how much fat, that label on the back could be looked at as metadata about what's inside. So hope that helps. I can always talk more about it.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Maybe Logan, to you, is there kind of a science around how you think about metadata, and can we discuss it within data science, and how do you think about it?
Yeah, so I geek out on metadata and the usefulness it has to data science and building up, say, your data catalogs and whatnot. When you think about management of data, like most of the data catalogs on the market, I'm not super happy with because they require so much human intervention and they just end up at great ideas at the beginning and ultimately unmaintained. But capturing that metadata around your data and capturing as much of it as you can programmatically on the outset is so beneficial to data science, particularly where some of the areas where we see a lot of powerful experiments and analysis and forecasts is when you are comparing data off of different domains. So an easy low-hanging one that we do all the time is pull in weather data, and pulling in weather data to compare what was going on at that time with anything that we're trying to look at that has to do with human behavior. But finding the right weather data, finding the right topics, finding the right regions, all that kind of stuff. When you have really, really good metadata, it's easy for you to do those cross-references on your data. Basically, it sets you up a level so you can look across different domains. And so I think it's super powerful. It's an area that should have more, investment in the tools to be able to manage it effectively.
Great. I'm definitely going to pay a lot more attention to it. I'm sure I'll see it everywhere now. Moving a bit into kind of from the data to some of the models. How do we think that data affects the adoption of some of the AI and machine learning models? What does it mean for data to affect that and affect those models? Do you start with the data? Do you start with the model? This gets back a little bit to our first question of having too much data, starting with the best. When you extract to the model, how do you think about it?
Yeah, I could take on this one. We had a situation a while back where I was working with some people in our healthcare divisions, and they were very interested in using in investigating anomaly detection as a model for health data. And I personally had a little bit of reservations about that because anomaly detection really doesn't tell you if something's wrong. It only tells you if it's something different. And so if your data, if your whole population starts to get sick overall, then your healthy people actually start to become your anomalies. So it's, in that situation, the data can really affect very much what you want, what models or what algorithms that you want to choose, because it may not be an appropriate choice for the long-term health of your model. Jane?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, your thoughts.
Well, I'm not an expert in machine learning or AI. I mean, I've worked a little bit in machine learning, and I'm now working with convolutional neural networks, which I never thought I would, but I'm really learning about it. So in my biased or limited view, I would say that you're knowing your data first is key to the model. Like, your data and your data quality is you need to know that before you want to fit it into a model. Like, it's kind of like the square peg in the round hole thingy. Like, you have this model and you want your data to fit, but it might not be the right data. So, but again, I'm just new at working in sort of the AI aspects of it, some of it.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring that up, being like the neural networks and whatnot. There are also situations where like the data or your outcomes or the domain you're working in can really choose the model. So, neural networks and some of those, they're kind of black boxes, and it can be very difficult to identify how the model came to the answer that it did. And in certain domains, insurance, fraud, those things which can have very personal effects on people, those aren't always appropriate models to choose. In some respects, they may be even more accurate and more powerful than the older models, but the older models are more transparent. And so there are situations where, we make a decision based on transparency as well, so that, what answers we get are defensible.
Yeah.
When you talk about transparency, do you think about explaining it to the user, or kind of being able to then make changes from it? Is it more about knowing what goes into the model, or knowing what the model tells you, how to make changes on whatever you're looking at?
So it can be both. So certainly it's explainability to the end user. That's, an area where we started to investigate and think about within DXC was around AI ethics. And to us, a lot of the AI ethics really boils down to transparency and explainability, and that everybody can understand what's going on. And so when I talk about transparency, yes, that definitely means you can explain the output of a model to an end user and how that model ultimately made the choice or the prediction that it did. Oftentimes, like Jane was saying, on the data as it comes in. If there's a lot of data you're throwing away because it's corrupted or it's missing, that ultimately affects your model as well. But it is also for whether or not you're modifying it. When you're doing, parameter tuning, that's a lot of a judgment-based decision on the part of the data scientist on those parameters, and why you made a decision one way or another based on the data is also part of that transparency.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I want to switch gears a little bit, as this is a women's conference and International Women's Day. Why do you think some women may not self-select to go into this field? What are the pathways that maybe you personally or you've seen from your colleagues to get into the data science career? And is there something you think that as an industry we can be doing to make it more accessible to women?
All right, I'll jump in. I'm probably older than you guys. I just say the biggest factor I think that has, why we're even having WIDs now and things like this is lack of encouragement that women have received. Another is the absence of role models. So, but events like WIDs, really can make a difference. If I can recommend a movie for everyone, it's a documentary. It's called Code: Debugging the Gender Gap. Now, this is about, sort of more computing, not necessarily just data science, but it gives insights to, I think, where we are with data science and what's happened. And so, historically, computing was even over 30% women until like the early 80s. And then it became really macho. And, this whole concept of programmer and stuff. And the numbers of women just went down and we're not encouraging. But, we're all working hard to change that. And I think that because data science is so integrated and overlaps with aspects of computing and STEM and so forth, we see that too. I think that we just there's a much larger awareness now, and we have things like this. We have, and it's not only women who are engaged in things like WIDS. We've got men engaged in WIDS efforts, and we just got to keep working at it. But having role models and opportunities, pathways, and encouraging women is really, really critical. So.
Yeah, in awareness as well. So for me personally, I hadn't even heard of data science as a field until I was 30. And I probably really would have bit hard on this as a career, going into college when I was graduating high school, but I had no idea about it. And to me, computing and all the computing really all led, in my mind, it was all about gaming, really. And I just wasn't that interested. There's so few games out there that can keep my interest for more than like 30 minutes. Like, I can kind of play, but it's just not my form of entertainment. And at 18, that was the equation I had in my head. And so I didn't even consider computer science as even a precursor into data science. I think that's changing some now. I think the field is a lot more talked about. I think STEM and STEM opportunities for young girls and young women have a lot more, what's the word I want? Exposure. I certainly see it. My daughter is 6. I certainly see it, at her school. They do coding for kids. She's in 1st grade and they do little coding things. So I'm hopeful that, as the next generations come through, that we will see an increase in women again in the field, because there's a re-exposure to them, that this is a great field to be a part of.
That's great. I mean, I think when I was in college, I don't remember data science as an option.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's good that throughout, from age 6 on up, it's getting more.
Yeah.
So kind of continuing on the theme of education, Jane, I know you teach and work, I'm sure, with a lot of grad students. What are some of the challenges of data in the graduate analytics program? How are people teaching data, teaching the importance of data, and how do you think about that? And Logan, if you want to add on this as well.
Oh, I went to unmute. So I think, the challenge, is it data science? Is it data analytics? Where do you kind of get in? I think I was at a DOE workshop and somebody said, we're in the Stone Age and trying to figure this stuff out. I like to think, we're in the Bronze Age. We are definitely more advanced. But I think one of the challenges is trying to find the, comfort launch way for people. It's how you can't, there's so many facets to data science, right? So what is, your program and the area that you're going to focus on? So is it focusing on computing and algorithms? Is there a need for an emphasis more in the ethics areas, or social impact? Data science programs try to cover, the full range, but I think it's really, really hard. So having an understanding of, do I really want to be in the sort of statistical end of things, or do I really want to be in the computational end? We need to understand all of it, but in terms of teaching, you know, to advance the field and advance the area, you need to have, I mean, it's my bias, but I think some concentration and the recognition, you know, teaching students, okay, you're going to have to work with other people that have that other expertise. And this gets into other kinds of questions about team building and stuff. So I think that's it, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a big thing. AI and data science really is a team sport. You know, you look at recruiting and you see these, you know, job requisitions for people who like they're trying to have an entire department in one person, you know, the unicorn. And it's not like that. It's very much a team sport. And I recently had a conversation with a young woman. She's a math major and she's thinking about data science and talking about, like what you said, the different facets of it. You know, those who are wanting to build new algorithms and, you know, new ways of analyzing data. And I think, you know, her background, she's probably well poised for that with a strong mathematical background. But there's also that facet of being an applied data scientist. You're actually working on the data day to day. You're not necessarily building all that many new algorithms for yourself. You're learning how to apply those algorithms and make the models to give you information about, you know, whatever your domain is. And I think understanding those two sides of what data science is, especially in programs, is really powerful for people because people have different sides that interest them. I think for me, one thing in business and enterprise I would like to see is, particularly for the applied data scientists, more opportunities to work with dirty data. They work so much on clean data because, of course, they're trying to learn the concepts, but then they go out into the wild and they're like, I can't use this. I'm like, well, that's what you have. So, you know, I could definitely see some benefit, even if it's just like a special topic, you know, special topics in dirty data, you know, would be I think a huge benefit in education.
Yeah, can I just jump in with one more thing? So, you know, not to sound like I'm advertising for Drexel, but, you know, I say it's a challenge, but also an opportunity. And one of the things is our data science program actually spans information science and computer science. So we have those that are really in the computational, I want to, you know, do algorithms, and those that are applied. So I'm really happy that you brought up the applied end. And those are people that like, they have fun cleaning data, whereas the algorithm people like, I don't want to clean it, give it to me clean, you know. So I think what you really said is key. Yeah,
that's great. So we got some questions from the audience, so I'll read some of those, and I think they kind of piggyback nicely on some of what we were talking about. So do you have any helpful insights for a 30-year pursuing data analytics in grad school with respect to age and success? So I'm not sure exactly what they mean by that last part, but go for
it. Can you read that again?
Do you have any helpful insights for a 30-year-old pursuing data analytics in grad school with respect to age and success?
I can jump in, or while you're thinking.
No, go for it.
I don't let the age thing bother you. Who cares? Go do what you want, you know. Yeah. But I, you know, opportunities for real world experience, you know, whether it's internship or, you know, co-op or any kind of thing, you know, do your, you know, obviously you need to do your coursework but looking for opportunities where you can get on the front line and really, you know, even if it's volunteering, but they should pay you because they need people with your skills. But I wouldn't let the age thing bother you.
Yeah, certainly not. I was 30 when I first learned about data science. So my background I was a business administration with an emphasis in management major, and I was working in HR. Now I was working in HR benefits and doing a lot of stuff with our data at the time. But that's where I was when I first learned about data science and that it even existed. And so if you're already in a graduate program, you're using something that's going to give you a leg up, that's going to give you that leverage to get into the field. But yeah, the age in this honestly just gives you more perspective on things, which
That's
I think
nice.
is an asset when it comes to working with data.
Awesome. Well, I'm sorry, we're getting so many good questions. I'm sorry to interrupt to go on to the next talk, but thank you, ladies, so much. Clearly, that was a great panel, and the audience wants more of it. So, we can try to combine some of these questions together and see if there's a way to get them out to the audience. Honestly, I wish I had your help in my last experiments.
Thank you. I mean, not that I'm going to answer for Ruth, but if they sent them to us, I think we'd both be happy to share some responses. I would, if you want just quickies, we could try.
Absolutely.
I don't know how you
Okay, sounds
disseminate
great. We can try to facilitate some of that stuff. So thank you so much.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.